discussion before we move on.
Sure. Well, you know, it's amazing about when you're talking about FEMA, you know, there's supposed to be, you know, emergency management. And it doesn't apply, though. Remember, if you had a Trump sign in your yard or they knew that you were going for President Trump. And to Dutch's point, I think the people that are protesting this are outraged with, you know, that there's even a question of where the money's being spent. Right. They need to really reflect. What are you hiding? Why are you not wanting all of this to come out? But let's be honest. Those of you that are watching tonight, we all knew that this has been going on. We just needed strong leadership who would be bold enough and willing enough to expose it and get to the root of it. And, Gene, that's what we're seeing happen. Yes. Lastly, you remember the bills that they would always bring before Congress? You know, the actual thing that they're trying to, you know, pass was always like 2 pages, and there was the pork spending. Remember all that? It was like 800 pages of stuff that never applied. Well, we've had enough of that. Watch the $1 trillion deficit of America get reduced by who knows how much, but we, the taxpayers, deserve it.
Yeah, we do. In fact, let me show you this with this House Speaker, Mike Johnson, talking about the rule of law. Watch.
As I said last week, the Democratic Party is in a completely different place right now. There's no identified leader of the party. They don't have a clear vision. They seem rudderless. In hopes of finding themselves, they've latched onto this new shiny object called the rule of law. Well, we'd like to welcome them to the concept. It would be admirable if they hadn't spent the last 4 years with their heads buried in the sand while Biden literally trampled over the rule of law with no objection. In fact, many Democrats cheered that lawlessness, like when the Biden administration unconstitutionally forced the middle class to pay the student loans of doctors and lawyers, when they illegally mandated that private companies implement vaccine requirements, when they radically rewrote Title IX to undermine women's rights. Those things were actually illegal, and the Democratic Party cheered it. They didn't oppose it at all. President Trump, by contrast, is taking legitimate executive action to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in all these federal programs. That's what the American people demand and deserve. That's what they voted for. They voted for a real analysis and a real change, transformational kind of change in the way the federal government works. And the only people who take issue with it are these same congressional Democrats who never before had any issue with unelected staff or even bureaucrats running the White House for the last 4 years. That's not what's happening here. The president has empowered his new cabinet secretaries and the DOGE effort and all of these branches, divisions in the executive branch of government to go and find where the abuses have taken place. And every time something new is unearthed and uncovered and we share it with the people, they applaud that this has been discovered, and they want us to keep going, and that's what's going to happen.
It is what's going to happen, but you know, we on that reform that Dutch was speaking of.
Sure. Well, I think we got to circle back around to what Lance was prophetically saying that I think is absolutely pegging where we're at, and that's this. We are in a time now where the enemy is trying to counter the justice of God. So what he does is he uses a lot of this corruption, this lawfare and different things, use these corrupt judges to try to distract or to get things held up or thrown out. So what we have to do is Luke 18. We have to be like the widow. We have to press against injustice. She did against an unjust judge. And the Bible says that will not God avenge us speedily when we do from our adversaries? It's going to shift. Lastly, I want to say this. I also believe there's a biblical narrative that has to do with Korah and 250 that decided to join his party and come against the leader that God chose and the nation that he was raising up. In the end, God came down as the judge. That's where we're at. We're in God's justice now, and all of those 250, including Korah, was taken out by the justice of God. It's going to get more interesting. We just have to continue to press and see the avenging speedily from our adversaries.
Yeah, and let me show you this. Representative Eli Crane I'm drafting articles of impeachment for U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer. Partisan judges abusing their positions is a threat to democracy. The left has done irreparable harm to this country. President Trump and his team at DOJ are trying to fix it. When we see this, Luke, what stands out to me...
A man named Muammar Gaddafi under Ronald Reagan, and he was acting up. And they asked President Ronald Reagan, what are you going to do? And his great words were, "We'll just watch." And then the next day, it was all over the news. I mean, there was bombs flying and everything. But you never heard from Muammar Gaddafi after that. And it sent a message out to other nations that we had a strong leader who wasn't going to mess around. And I think of a prophecy back in 2016, 17, right when President Trump was elected. God said, "I gave you Ronald, my Ronald," speaking about Ronald Reagan. "Now I've given you my Donald." And you're seeing a lot of similarities. What I mean is, this Ronald Reagan did what he said. We saw that. This Donald is going to do what he said. Lastly, and I want people to hear me in the context of how I'm going to say this. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, one of the things that the Lord said to Israel, if you're going to take out the enemy and inherit the land, you're to show no mercy. In other words, the leaders, the military, those that were going and fighting for the nation couldn't have this nice spirit, or they would never, ever drive out the giants and take over the promise of what God has said. Previous administrations have been too nice. God is saying, you cannot have that. This is about setting a reset that God is bringing to the nations of the earth in his global awakening.
Amen. Wow. We all want that. I think we all want that. But you know, we have to be strong. And I think this is something the church has learned because you've been watching Flashpoint, obviously. You've learned that you can't just lay down and not stand up for what you're doing, for what is right. And that, when you see that, let's remember, it's really easy to forget the last guys who were in charge. But remember, there's this picture, I wish we'd have got it before, of Lloyd Austin as he's walking down, and he's got this giant, he's a big guy, and he's got this giant mask, and he looks like Darth Vader walking down the street. And then now we have Pete Hegseth. Now look at this guy. He gets up, and he goes, and he trains with the Green Berets. He kicked off his day in Germany training with the elite Green Berets of the 110 Fighting Group, one of the U.S. Army's most formidable special forces unit. When I see this, Luke, this is you talk about someone that emits power, and we got other pictures. I wanted to show the other pictures of Pete Hegseth working out with his troops. There's nothing that brings these guys together more than seeing a leader that's willing to, that's strong, he's powerful, he's in there with his troops, and he's going to get the job done. What do you think, Luke?
It shows what the standard is going to be moving forward. I mean, the rest of the world has watched this as we've argued over Zims, and China's thinking about sending over the booms. That's really bad for the United States of America if we're over here talking about DEI in the military, if we're talking about what our pronouns are, if we're talking about what gender we had just come up with that particular morning. That is not a strong fighting force. And you're exactly right, because I saw this post and my mind immediately leapt to Lloyd Austin wearing the double masks and the face shield and walking in front of the military formation that I guess was required to do the same. And I just thought, what a tone shift. When Lloyd Austin came in, we had a 60-day stand down in the military to address a problem that did not exist, MAGA extremism or white extremism or whatever they wanted to call it in the military. And now we are seeing that the tone has completely changed from that past administration because they didn't find anything that they were trying to find. They found like 0.01% of individuals that they said might have had a problem, and those people probably had a track record already. And so they just kind of let it slide under the rug. They just wanted to message against our military members, against our service members, the ones that are fighting for our freedoms overseas. And it all comes back to this central concept. And I'm going to butcher the quote, so I'm not going to try to string it together, but we have had some very good times in terms of not having to fight major wars like World War I or World War II. We've we've had some conflicts come up, but I think Americans by and large have been lulled into this sense of complacency that we just take our freedoms for granted. Do you remember after 9/11 when we all came together and we were so patriotic and we bonded together and we were like, we have to be strong for ourselves and be able to send these men and women who are going overseas to actually support that mission that they had been given from their country and written a blank check at that particular time? Now we've kind of lulled into the sense of like, well, we should have some diversity in our military in terms of what genders we allow in and the mental illnesses we tolerate. No longer. It is setting the tone for a new day in America and a new day in our military.
All right, Rick, I want to show you this picture here again. Here he is, Lloyd Austin in all his glory. It's either Darth Vader or he's going to go do some spot welding after he finishes inspecting the troops here. It's actually more like a welder's mask. You know, this is...
this was their bend the knee, man. This was how they showed allegiance to Pope Fauci and the, you know, all the insanity. The contrast is real. I think what Luke's saying is really, really important. I mean, this business of just having a wave the flag patriotism, which is kind of what we had after 9/11. We were threatened, you know, we were harmed, we were attacked, and so we just had a knee-jerk reaction of hey, we got together, red, white, yellow, black, or brown, no more hyphenated Americans. We had that renewed patriotism. That's good, but it's not enough. We ended up after that renewed patriotism falling into all this Marxism and buying all these lies. So what we need now is what Reagan called for 60 years ago, which is informed patriotism. And I think the beauty of the situation that we're in right now is that people's eyes are open, they're listening, they're watching Flashpoint instead of these left-wing, you know, feeding the little birds with the lies. They're getting the information. It's just like we talked about last night, that I forget the word you used, but the deeper theology of even the athletes as they thank God, the fact that it's not the same shallow stuff. So I think that's an important part of this shift in this turn, is that informed patriotism, so that because we're more informed, because we're more educated on these things, because we understand the principles, we're more willing to say, yes, cut that entire program. I no longer want that feel-good program. So even with something like FEMA that we've said for a long time, I've said for a long time, should not even exist, you couldn't get people to even accept that idea because they only saw this shallow, oh, but we're going to help people. Now they see the depth of it, they see the corruption, and they are starting to understand the intellectual argument behind having state and local deal with that, not the national. So anyway, I think what Luke said is right on, and I think that is hope for the future, the fact that we're having a deeper understanding of these things. Informed patriotism. That's
informed
what we need.
patriotism. Well, just like the Department of Education. All right, so let me, I want to, this is kind of the last story because it's something I want to talk about. And let me show you this Benny Johnson post, this breaking Anna Paulina Luna to lead the task force declassifying secrets for Epstein, JFK, 9/11, and COVID-19 origins and more. I think we know where COVID-19 happened. Anyway, it's time to give Americans the answers they deserve, which is why I'm honored to lead this bipartisan task force that seeks truth and transparency. Transparency, can you believe that? Let me show you this clip from Scripps News. Watch.
What's your priority list? Because Epstein, 9/11.
Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
Oh, we just kind of breezed right by that. Okay. Let me show you this. Scoop, FBI, this was a big one. You guys missed it. Find secret JFK assassination records after Trump order 2,400 unreviewed records. I'm sure they didn't find them. Maybe they purposely didn't want to find them. Come on, Pastor Hank, this is amazing, amazing stuff. And this is just the beginning. We haven't even got to it. Mike, let me show you this. That's right. This is Glenn Beck talking about Epstein. Watch.
The only thing I care about is the scandal of the pedophiles. And in the next 10 days, you're going to see the Epstein file released.
In the next 10 days?
Next 10 days.
Oh, please.
Yep.
You think in the next 10 days the whole thing's going to be released?
Yeah.
And what kind of information you have to be able to be that certain about it?
I plead the fifth.
In the next 10 days.
The next 10 days.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Next 10 days.
You're
I'm telling
teasing millions who want that list.
Day number 1, Kash Patel walks in. By the end of the day, it will be released.
Oh, please.
Did Kash Patel get confirmed yet?
Not yet. They
Not
delayed
yet.
it.
And did RFK get confirmed yet?
Not yet.
Tulsi?
None of them, though.
House, not Senate. Yeah.
So as soon as he's confirmed, his first day, it will be released.
Oh, I can't wait.
All right, so a little update there. Tulsi Gabbard may be as early as midnight tonight. They may take a vote. Then it's on to RFK Jr. and then Kash Patel. It's looking good for all of them, so we're just going to pray them all the way through. But Pastor Hank, you saw that about JFK, Epstein files. What do you think? This is, talk about exposing. We're seeing a lot of exposing.
Sure. Well, we have to go back to what we've been saying for 4 years on this show, that Exodus chapter 8, there was a time when the magicians seemed like they could do everything that God was trying to do through Moses and Aaron until something showed up. It was the finger of God. Everything shifted. God said for the last 4 years on this program, what would be classified or is classified would be declassified. But God was going to shove his finger, his thumb. There would be thumb drives, lists, emails that they thought didn't exist. And God said, all of this is going to come out in the light, and your mouth is going to drop open when you see who and what has been done. And he said, especially to the children. This is about God's justice. They can't escape.
It's true. All right, Dutch, wrap it up for me. You got a couple minutes.